The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the smell of it still lingered in the air. Lola sat by the cafe window, watching as students walked by in groups. Her coffee had gone cold. She hadn't touched it. She kept glancing at the door. Every time it opened, her heart jumped, foolishly and hopefully. And every time it wasn't him, the weight in her chest sank a little deeper. Andrew was supposed to meet her by 6 p.m., and it was now 8:30 p.m. Yet, no calls from him, no texts, not even an excuse. Her phone lay face up beside the cup of cold coffee, the screen blank. She smiled bitterly. She had become an expert at waiting. She is always either waiting for his calls, waiting for his attention, his apologies, and even his love. And somehow, it had become her normal routine. Outside the cafe, laughter floated across the street, with couples holding hands, students running from one side of the road to another. The world moved on, uncaring. But Lola sat still. She took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and typed, "Are you still coming?" But she deleted it before she could send it. What was the point? She already knew the answer. She met Andrew 2 years ago, on a bright afternoon at the university library. She had been seated in the corner, surrounded by thick books, trying to finish her assignment before the school generator went off again. He walked in confidently, smiling at everyone as though he owned the air. When he asked if the seat beside her was free, she nodded, barely looking up. He started talking to her about random stuff. Lola laughed, softly and awkwardly. It was the first time someone had looked at her like she was interesting. He took her number that day, and by evening, he called her. They started seeing each other almost every day. They always had lunch at the school cafeteria. They took evening walks through the campus gardens, having endless conversations about their dreams and life after graduation. He called her my calm. And for a long time, she believed she was. Andrew had a way of making her feel special. He always noticed the little things about her, like how she tucked her hair behind her ear whenever she was nervous, and how she bit her lower lip whenever she was reading. Lola had always been quiet, careful, and always guarded. But with Andrew, she opened up like a flower. Then, they became inseparable. Whenever she laughed, it was louder. And whenever she walked, she lifted her head higher. And for a while, love felt like sunlight. It was warm and endless. But love, she would later learn, can also fade quietly. It began with the small things, like Lola's messages being left on read, and her calls that went unanswered. Then came Andrew's excuses. "I've been busy, I fell asleep, I forgot." As unbelievable as the excuses were, Lola wanted to believe him. She told herself everyone gets distracted sometimes. But slowly, she realized she was the only one trying to keep their relationship from falling apart. Andrew stopped showing up for her presentations. He forgot their couple's dates, even though she always reminded him multiple times. Sometimes, he would disappear for days and return with soft apologies and his charming smiles. And each time, Lola forgave him, because she couldn't imagine her life without him. There was a night she would never forget. She had called him 10 good times. And when he finally picked up, his voice was low and cold. "Lola, I'm out with my friends. Call me back later if you want," Lola whispered. "But you said we would go over my project together this evening," her voice almost breaking. "Babe, I can't right now," he replied coldly. Then, the line went silent. She sat in her room for hours, staring at her phone, until her tears blurred the screen. And when he didn't call her back, she convinced herself that he was probably too tired, and he would reach out to her the next day. The next day turned into the next week. When Lola's roommate asked why she tolerated it, Lola said, "It was because love means being patient." But even as she said it, she wasn't convinced with her own answer. Lola started shrinking herself, becoming quieter, gentler, and easier to love. She avoided complaining for peace to reign. She avoided asking for too much, so as not to irritate Andrew. She smiled even when she was sad, and she laughed even when all she wanted to do was cry. And Andrew? He didn't notice the difference. He didn't see that the girl who once had opinions now nodded at everything he said. One evening, she ran into him outside a campus restaurant. He was sitting with another girl. They weren't holding hands, but they didn't have to. The closeness between them said enough. Lola froze. Andrew looked up, startled. Then, he smiled, that disarming smile, and said, "Hey Lola, you're here too." She replied calmly, "I thought you said you had a meeting." He shrugged lightly and replied, "I did, but it ended early." The girl beside him smiled politely. Lola managed a nod, then walked away before her voice broke. That night, she cried quietly on her pillow until she fell asleep. He didn't bother to call her. He didn't check up on her. The next few weeks were a blur for Lola. Andrew became a stranger who sent short messages like, "Hope you're good." She responded with emojis and small talks, pretending not to notice the distance between them. She lost her appetite. Her friends noticed the dark circles under her eyes. Even her mother asked her during a phone call, "Are you okay, my daughter? You sound very tired." Lola smiled weakly as she replied, "I'm fine, Mama. It's just normal school stress." But school wasn't the problem. It was loving someone who treated her heart like a background noise. One Saturday morning, Lola dressed up and went to Andrew's apartment unannounced. She told herself she just wanted to talk, to understand where she stood in their relationship. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see her. "Lola, you should have called," he said hesitantly. "I did," she said softly. "But you aren't picking my calls." He ran a hand through his hair and said, "I've just been so busy lately." She took a deep breath and asked, "Busy with what?" He hesitated and said, "Just a couple of things." Lola ran out of patience at that moment. She asked him almost immediately, "Andrew, do you still want this relationship?" He sighed, avoiding her eyes. "I don't know. You're amazing, but lately I feel distant," he replied. She felt the world tilt. Her fingers trembled as she muttered, "Distant? Yeah, maybe we need a break." Andrew said confidently. The words were gentle, but they sliced through her like glass. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. He stepped forward, maybe to hug her, but she moved back. "Don't," she whispered. Then she turned and walked out. That was 3 months ago. And now, here she was, sitting in a cafe, waiting for a man who no longer owed her his time. She stared at the empty seat across from her and realized how symbolic it was. He had left her alone long before he walked away. Her reflection in the window looked unfamiliar. Her tired eyes, her thin smile, and her soft hands clutching hope. She picked up her phone again and opened their old chat. Scrolling through the endless good mornings and I miss yous. She wondered how love could become a ghost that still haunted her phone. She found herself typing, "I miss who we used to be." But then she paused. Who they used to be, or who she used to be. That question followed her back into her room. She went to class, sat in the middle row, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she had taken notes for herself, not to impress him, and not to prove she was still worth something. After class, she wandered through the gardens. She walked past the benches where they once sat. The flower trees were in bloom, with petals covering the ground like tiny bruises. She sat beneath one and closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she didn't cry. She just took a deep breath. And with that breath came a strange kind of peace. The quiet acceptance that some people love you only until they have nothing left to take. Weeks passed. The heartache dulled but never disappeared. She started going out with her friends again, slowly and awkwardly. They laughed about random things like assignments, rude lecturers, and bad cafeteria food. One evening, she walked past the cafe again, the same one she had waited in for hours. Through the window, she saw a couple laughing, their hands intertwined. For a moment, she felt pain in her chest. Then she smiled. Not sadly, just softly. She had once thought her life would end if someone stopped loving her. Now she knew it didn't. It only changed shape. A few weeks later, she received a message from Andrew which read, "Hey, been thinking about you. Hope you're okay." She read it twice, then set her phone down. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. She just felt calm. She typed slowly, "I'm fine, Andrew. Hope you're doing well." And for the first time, she meant it. She closed the chat, locked her phone, and looked around her small hostel room. Her books were stacked neatly again. The semester ended. At graduation, Lola stood among hundreds of students, tossing her cap into the air. She looked around but didn't search for him. When people asked about her plans, she smiled and said, "To start again. But this time for me." That night, she walked to the campus rooftop, her favorite place to think. The city lights stretched endlessly below, and the breeze carried the scent of rain again. She whispered into the wind, "I loved him more than myself. But I survived." Tears welled up, not of pain, but of release. She realized that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering without breaking. A few weeks later, while scrolling through her old photos, she paused at one. Her and Andrew at the library, laughing. She didn't delete it. She just stared for a moment, then whispered, Thank you for teaching me what not to lose again. My worth. That night, as the rain began to fall softly again, she lay in bed watching the droplets trace lines on her window. The world outside shimmered, messy, alive, and beautiful. She smiled faintly, turned off her phone, and whispered to herself, I found my worth too late, but at least I found it. Sometimes, love doesn't end with a loud goodbye. Sometimes, it fades quietly, until one day, you realize you've been loving someone who left long ago. But when you find your worth, even late, it still saves you. Like this video, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting African stories with moral lessons.